Welcome everybody to today's video. Today on Elections Retrospective, the channel where we discuss American politics, elections, both past and present, and history, we will be doing a discussion whether or not Matthew McConaughey has a realistic shot at the Texas governorship. Now, for those of you unaware, McConaughey is a Hollywood, actor whose political affiliation is currently unknown, but he has stated that he has been quote unquote seriously considering a run for governor of Texas. In a recent poll, he has taken a double-digit lead over Greg Abbott, which is pretty surprising. Although it's not saying much since it's only just one poll. So more polls will have to be conducted to get a better grasp at if he actually does have a realistic chance against Abbott. But the poll that has currently gone out looks very good for him, surprisingly. Now, there has been speculation that if he does run, he might run maybe as a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. Now, we can try to infer what party he would most likely run under. McConaughey has said in the past he is Christian and has taken rather moderate stances on issues such as gun control and defunding the police compared to other Hollywood actors who tend to be more on the left wing. He himself has identified as a moderate. He's pro-Second Amendment, while at the same time he's called for more responsible gun ownership. Now, it becomes slightly more apparent he would run as a Democrat because this is a statement that Republicans usually don't make. Republicans, although not all, place more trust on gun owners and usually avoid discussing more responsible gun ownership, although not all. Another hint that he might run as a Democrat is the fact he ran pro-mask PSAs during the pandemic. Most Republicans usually don't overtly do such a thing, and few on the most conservative end of the Republican Party are skeptical of mask wearing in general. Now, even if McConaughey doesn't identify as a Democrat, and he doesn't run as a Democrat for the governorship, if he runs at all in the first place, it would be more politically advantageous to run as a Democrat as opposed to a Republican or an independent. The reason for this is because current hypothetical polling, despite its many moderate and somewhat crossover appeal amongst Republicans, due to him being somewhat of an outsider, he has. Let's see. Does this Guardian article? No, it was from the Dallas Times, I believe. But from a article by the Dallas Times, it said that he has only 30% support amongst Republicans in a recent poll, as opposed to over 60% of support among Democrats. In a Republican primary, if McConaughey were to run, he would do absolutely abysmally, and that's putting it lightly. He'd probably get less than 30% in a GOP primary against Abbott, and that's mirrored by another recent poll which shows only 20% of Republicans want a more centrist candidate than Abbott. And in a Democratic primary, McConaughey would do fairly well considering his level of support among Democrats, as well as the fact in another poll more Texan Democratic primary voters wanting a more moderate candidate compared to a more progressive one. There's a lot of ifs. If McConaughey were to run for the Democratic primary, if Beto O'Rourke decides not to run, unlike what he has hinted at recently, he shouldn't have that hard of a time getting the nomination, considering his levels of support among Democrats. If Beto O'Rourke does run, however, it would likely be a very contested primary between the two. McConaughey would do better among moderates, of course, while O'Rourke would do better among progressives. In such a scenario, it'd be hard to say who'd come out on top. Now, on the question of who would be a better candidate between McConaughey or Beto O'Rourke, I think that without a doubt, McConaughey would be a better candidate than O'Rourke if he were to be the Democratic nominee for governor. You could argue that Beto did come close to winning a Senate seat in 2018, but then I'd argue he's kind of gone off the rails since then, especially with regards to his statement on gun control or statements during the 2020 Democratic primaries. Texas is a very pro gun loving state, as many of you know, and Beto O'Rourke saying during the primaries, quote unquote, hell yes, we're going to take your AR 15s, that will not bode well among voters there, especially when he's running against Greg Abbott, who, let me just remind everyone, won in 2018 during a Democratic wave year by 13 points and won in 2014 by an even larger percentage. He and Beto O'Rourke would be running against such a governor. It wouldn't look good for Beto O'Rourke. It wouldn't bode well, his statements. I mean, if he hadn't made such statements, I think he would be a much more viable candidate in Texas in 2022. But honestly, I don't think he has a chance in 2022. I think he has much better odds if he were to run for the Senate in 2024 against Ted Cruz, considering Ted Cruz's scandal with taking a trip to Cancun. But then again, Beto O'Rourke might want to run for the governorship in 2022 because he doesn't want to fade into obscurity. And I get that, considering the fact that the last time he was in office, it was 3 years ago, or almost 3 years ago. Now, if McConaughey runs as an actually, let's get to that later. As for if McConaughey were to run as a Democrat, how would it look for him if he were to run against Greg Abbott? McConaughey, who is more moderate on issues such as gun control and who has some support among Republicans as well as a plurality of support from independents, as a matter of fact, in a recent poll, he would definitely put Texas into play. Although that's not a certainty, but it's very possible if McConaughey is running. It's kind of it's kind of weird how an actor could prove to possibly be a more viable candidate than Beto O'Rourke, who uh, who almost won a Senate seat against Ted Cruz. But that's the way it will be. Now, if McConaughey runs as an independent, that's a whole nother story. He would possibly be able to gain quite some traction. However, he might take some votes from Abbott, but he would predominantly split the vote from the Democratic candidate. This would lead to a similar situation to the 2006 Texas gubernatorial election, where there was a large third party presence, and Rick Perry won by just a plurality of the vote. Let me pull that up real quick. Now, as you can see, this is the 2006 gubernatorial election, and Rick Perry won re-election. There was a very large third party presence. You had the Green Party taking almost 20% of the vote, as well as an independent named Kinky Friedman. And it was very interesting. Now, if McConaughey runs as an independent, such a situation could likely happen, although not with four major third party candidates, but rather Greg Abbott, Beto O'Rourke, and McConaughey as an independent. And yeah, that will pretty much wrap up today's video. In summary, I think that in all likelihoods, if McConaughey were to run, he would run as a Democrat. Now, he might do better than Beto O'Rourke against Greg Abbott, although that's not a certainty, but it is more likely. And yeah, now we don't know if he will run or not yet, but he has started to allude to it, and he's seriously considering it, in fact. So we'll just have to see how this plays out. And with that said, I'll see you all next time in the next video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more political content like this. See ya.